In a twisted, crazy, wild, shocking turn of events, the ICC, ladies and gentlemen, has decided to pursue arrest warrants against Netanyahu and the leader of Hamas. I kid you not, I didn't believe this at first when I heard about it. I was like, let me Google this information, because it was just a picture on Twitter. There was no source attached to the picture. So I said, let me Google this to see if this, and I was like, holy smokes, it is true. In fact, the chief prosecutor sat down with Christine Amanpour of CNN to explain why they are moving forward with these arrest warrants. And then I'm going to explain to you how Netanyahu and the State Department are responding to this. Let's get into it.
We're here at the ICC. You are today announcing that you are applying for arrest warrants for top military and political leadership in the Israel-Gaza war since the October 7th events. First and foremost, explain to me exactly what you're asking for and who you are charging.
Today, Christiane, we've applied for warrants to the pretrial chamber of the International Criminal Court in relation to 3 individuals that are Hamas members. Sinwar, who's in charge on the ground.
That's Yahya Sinwar?
Absolutely. Daif, who's in charge of the Al-Qassam Brigade. And Hania, who's one of their political bureau based in Doha.
What are the...
Pause. So did you notice something with this interview, right? Notice he did not lead with Netanyahu. Could just be a coincidence, but I found that to be interesting that he didn't lead with probably the most well-known of the people they want to issue arrest warrants to is Bibi Netanyahu. But you notice he didn't lead with that. He led with Hamas leader, right? Remember, it is still CNN. And I think back to the pressure that the ICC received in reference to pursuing an arrest warrant. They were threatened by senators from the US government. They threatened them via letter. They actually put it in a letter and they signed it. So we saw all of their names trying to pressure them against doing their job and essentially acting like a mafia. But here we are.
Charges.
The charges are extermination, murder, taking of hostages, rape and sexual assault in detention.
Did you hear that part? So he brings up the SA issue, right? Now, the New York Times article that actually, they were the first ones to discuss those claims. That article has been debunked multiple times. There has been no forensics evidence in reference to October 7 SA. There has been none, which they acknowledge. But everybody is continuing with that narrative, and that includes the chief prosecutor of the ICC. What about the SA allegations against the IDF from the Palestinian prisoners?
These are the key crimes that are alleged to have been committed by these 3 individuals. The world was shocked on the 7th of October when people were ripped from their bedrooms, from their homes, from the different kibbutzim in Israel. And people have suffered enormously. And we have a variety of evidence to support the applications that we've submitted to the judges.
You have also issued warrants against the top political and military leadership of the government of the State of Israel.
We've applied for...
So notice how in order to get him to mention Netanyahu, she had to pull it out of him. He didn't openly volunteer that information.
For warrants, of course, the judges must determine whether or not to issue them. But we've applied today, we'll apply for warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and also Minister of Defense Gallant for the crimes of causing extermination, causing starvation as a method of war, including the denial of humanitarian relief supplies, deliberately targeting civilians in conflict.
So you guys heard all of that, right? Okay. Now, it was interesting to me because he is still trying to both sides this issue. Don't get it twisted. But if you actually check the UN's website, they actually have a list of categories about these charges. So it says the ICC is seeking arrest warrants for Hamas leaders and Israel's Netanyahu. So it gives a little bit more information here than that video. The first one that you see is the starvation tactic alleged. This includes starvation of civilians as a method of warfare is a war crime, right? Intentionally directing attacks against a civilian population and extermination and / or murder. So again, let's talk about the vocabulary that's being used. Notice they didn't say genocide. They're using the word extermination, but they're not using the word genocide. I really believe that's on purpose, right? But essentially what they're saying here is they're trying to commit genocide, basically. Pay attention to that. It goes on to say here, here's another category, unfathomable pain. It is the view of my office that these individuals planned and instigated the commission of war crimes on October 7th and have their own actions, including personal visits to hostages shortly after their kidnapping, acknowledge their responsibility for those crimes. Speaking with survivors, I heard how the love within a family, the deepest bonds between a parent and a child, were contorted to inflict unfathomable pain through calculated cruelty and extreme callousness. These acts demand accountability. Okay. Now they go on to say here, it says they interviewed victims and survivors and that this information, along with other sources, indicated they had been kept in inhumane conditions and some were subjugated to XSA. So the other sources that I think they're referring to is that New York Times article, which has already been debunked, but they're still including that as a part of the charges here. So notice they don't list the sources. They say other sources, not to mention some of those survivors actually came back around and said that they were not telling the truth, that the story was all made up. So they're leaving that part out. Continuing on, survivors' courage. It goes on to say here, on the issue of the liability of the top Israeli official Netanyahu and Mr. Gallant, it says alleged starvation as a method of war. This and other crimes against humanity were allegedly committed as part of a widespread and systemic attack against Palestinian civilian population pursuant to state policy. To reinforce the allegations, Mr. Khan cited interviews with survivors and eyewitnesses, authenticated video, photo, and audio material, satellite imagery, and statements which showed that Israel has intentionally and systemically deprived the civilian population in all parts of Gaza of objects indispensable to human survival. Now, again, considering what I just read to you there is no reason that the United States government should have still been supplying weapons to Israel, because it is a war crime to starve an entire population of people during war. That is not allowed, but Israel has been doing it. And I want to give a shout out to all the people that supplied the video footage. All of those journalists that were there in Gaza that captured the video of the people going through this ordeal. Had it not been for them, we would never know about this. This would have been hidden. We probably would have found out about this 10, 20 years ago, 10, 20 years later. It would have been hidden. This is why the IDF was targeting the journalists. This is why the IDF went into Al Jazeera's office and removed Al Jazeera. They also tried to remove video footage today from the Associated Press in Israel. They trying to silence all of the information because they did not want this to get out, what they were doing to those people. Had it not been for the video footage, had it not been for those journalists, a lot of the people in the world would still be siding with Israel. I do not doubt that. I do not doubt that if it wasn't for the video footage, people will feel differently. A lot of people would who didn't know about the history of this. So that's why they tried to silence the journalists. Aid siege. It goes on to say here, detailing the impact of total siege imposed by Israel on Gaza after October 8th, the ICC request to judges explained that this involved completely closing 3 border crossing points, Rafah, Kerem Shalom in the south, and Erez in the north, for extended periods, and then by arbitrarily restricting the transfer of essential supplies, including food and medicine, through the border crossing after they were reopened. Again, these were images that were caught on video. So again, shout out to the people that were there, the journalists that were able to capture those incidents happening, because otherwise Israel would just be able to continue to lie, and we would have no proof that they were doing these things. So shout out to the journalists. It goes on to say here, among other deprivations, the Israeli siege also cut off water and electricity pipelines to Gaza. So again, taking water away from the people. All of these things are considered war crimes. You cannot do this to civilian populations. This part here, gravest offenses. Although Israel has the right to defend itself under international law, Mr. Khan insisted that intentionally causing death, starvation, great suffering to civilians were clear breaches of the ICC's foundational charter. So Israel is not a signatory to the Rome Statute, while Palestine is. But again, according to some Zionists, they would tell you that Palestine was never real, that it never existed. Yet you find Palestine all throughout the UN's website. In this category here, no one is above the law. It says here, let me go here. I wanted to go to the right part. Unlike the ICJ, which is the UN's principal judicial organ for settling disputes between countries, the ICC tries individuals. The ICC is a permanent court based in The Hague. So that's important for people to understand. It goes on to say here, once a trial has ended, the judges may impose a sentence of imprisonment for a specified number of years, not exceeding a maximum of 30 years of life or life imprisonment. Now, this speaks to something that I actually questioned a while back when South Africa actually brought that case to the ICJ. And the ICJ said that Israel must do everything in their power to prevent genocide of the Palestinian people. At that point in time, it was one of you that actually sent me an email showing me that because of the decisions that Israel has made, that technically there should have been a call to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu. And you sent me the link from Cornell Law School where it actually explained that the maximum could be 30 years or life imprisonment. And that's a question I've been asking myself all along. Why hasn't anyone arrested Bibi at this point in time? So they are moving forward with this as much as they can. Now, I want to show you something because Sky News has been lying. They're already lying. They seem to think that we have short memories, particularly when it comes to this conflict. Shout out to Hotspot for this clip. So Sky News is discussing the arrest warrants. And listen to what they say. Listen to this. They are lying.
And wind back to the morning of October the 7th when, the world was waking up and we were starting to see some of those images from southern Israel about what had been, what Hamas had done. But you will remember, Jane, warnings from the Americans. You'll remember warnings from the British government as well, to the Israelis, be very, very careful about how you proceed. And
that is a lie. That is a blatant lie from Sky News. Somebody write this down. Maybe you can contact Sky News and tell them to stop lying. After the attack on October 7th, the U.S. government and the UK did no such thing. They did not tell Israel, be careful how you proceed. In fact, the response was, we are going to give Israel everything that they need to defeat Hamas. So why is Sky News making up this story? Now, all of a sudden, that there are arrest warrants that are being pursued against Bibi Netanyahu. Now, all of a sudden, Sky News is trying to make it seem like the U.S. government and the UK actually warned Bibi ahead of time and said, be careful about this. That is absolute BS. And you guys know this. They seem to think we forgot all of a sudden. They seem to think this started 4 years ago. This was just last fall. We haven't forgotten what was said. These people are lying. And why are they doing that? They're doing that because they don't want their leaders to be blamed for their part in the assault on Gaza. Now that there is an attack towards Netanyahu. Somebody call Sky News and let them know. Stop lying. Stop lying. So, of course, Bibi is not happy about these charges that are possibly coming his way. And he actually spoke on Good Morning America. You got to listen to this, right? So he makes a statement here that I think he thought was going to be a strong statement, is going to be a gotcha moment. But the statement that Netanyahu makes during this interview actually works against him. Listen to this.
He's creating a false symmetry between the democratically elected leaders of Israel and the terrorist chieftains. That's like saying after 9/11, well, I'm issuing arrest warrants for George Bush, but also for bin Laden, or after.
That is a bad example. Do you see this? You see how people like Netanyahu are still stuck in 2003? They still think that a lot of Americans support these wars. They still think that a lot of people are still neocons. You see how he's still stuck in 2003? Still stuck there. This does not work the way he thinks it does.
After 9/11, well, I'm issuing arrest warrants for George Bush, but also for bin Laden, or.
Right. So the problem is, to Netanyahu, a lot of Americans feel like that should have been done. Thank you. Thank you. A lot of Americans are not okay with what George W. Bush did, how he lied to get us into the Iraq war. A lot of Americans today are saying that George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton are war criminals, BB. Get with the times. So this does not work in his favor. This actually works against him. Do you think most of us are sitting back saying, oh, yeah, that's not fair? Yeah, we wouldn't want them to do that to George W. Bush. No, most of us, especially now, especially after we found out that they lied about the war in Iraq, most of us said he should have been locked up. This does not work in your favor.
After in World War II, well, I'm issuing arrest warrants for FDR, but also for Hitler. It's a hit job. It's not serious. He's out to defame Israel, and he's also pouring gasoline on the fires of anti-Semitism that are spreading around the world, because he is attacking the one and only Jewish state and trying to handcuff us, preventing us from exercising responsibly through the laws of war as we obey them and we are subordinate to them. He's saying we're not. He's creating false symmetry, false facts, and he's doing a grave injustice to the international court. He's creating a.
So this is everything that BB is saying. Like, these are the things that describe what his government is doing, creating false facts, lying, right? You know, he had to throw in anti-Semitism. Criticizing a state's government is not anti-Semitism. Criticizing a government is not anti-Semitism. He has nothing else to say. He uses this every time. This is what they just throw in. Zionists just throw this in there because they have nothing else to say, because they are guilty of these crimes. And they use that as their little ticket to punch out. The State Department also is not happy with the chief prosecutor from the ICC. In fact, Matt Miller is being, I would say, dragged through the coals about this announcement from the ICC. So, of course, the U.S. government does not support this arrest warrant going towards Netanyahu. They're totally fine with it to go towards Hamas, but not towards Netanyahu, even though Netanyahu has committed war crimes. Craig Markiber points out in this video clip you're about to see that Matt Miller is lying. He says Miller is openly lying here. Palestine has been a member of the ICC since 2015, and ICC jurisdiction over acts committed on Palestinian territory has long been confirmed. Yet another case of the U.S. trying to undercut international law on behalf of its oppressive foreign ally. So listen to this statement here from Matt Miller while he is grilled by journalists about the arrest warrants from the ICC.
I was kind of momentarily stunned by your original answers. I forgot my question, but these will be brief. So are you okay then with the application for arrest warrants against Hamas?
We do not believe that they have jurisdiction over either of the parties of this
So
conflict,
you don't think
and that includes Hamas.
You don't think that Hamas leaders should be prosecuted?
We absolutely believe that Hamas should be held accountable. That could
Held
be, hold on,
accountable.
let me finish. That could be either through the prosecution of the war effort by Israel. It could be,
in other words, being killed.
It could be by being killed. It could be by being brought to justice in an Israeli court. We do not believe the ICC has jurisdiction over either of the parties in this case because.
Let me start it over because I think the volume was low at first. So here we go.
Kind of momentarily stunned by your original answers. I forgot my question, but these will be brief. So are you okay then with the application for arrest warrants against Hamas?
We do not believe that they have jurisdiction over either of the parties of this
So
conflict,
you don't think
and that includes Hamas.
You don't think that Hamas leaders should be prosecuted?
We absolutely believe that Hamas should be held accountable. That could be, hold on, let me finish. That could be either through the prosecution of the war effort by Israel. It could be,
in other words, being killed.
It could be by being killed. It could be by being brought to justice in an Israeli court. We do not believe the ICC has jurisdiction over either of the parties in this case because the Palestinian people do not represent a state. And that includes the leaders of Hamas.
But obviously.
So going back to what Craig Monkheiber said, he said that the Palestinians have actually been a part of the ICC since 2015. So that is Matt Miller lying. You see, Matt Miller, the State Department, they think that people aren't going to look up this information. So that was a lie.
Obviously, the administration is also troubled by actions that Israel has taken post October 7th. So where's the accountability for that? Where do the Palestinians go? This is a question I asked Ned a long time ago, over and over and over again. Where do the Palestinians go to seek redress?
So let me answer this a couple of different ways. First of all, in the short term, with respect to questions of war crimes, Israel does have open investigations, a number of open investigations. We made this public when we released our report on National Security Memo 20, including some investigations that have become criminal investigations into conduct by members of the IDF. That is the first instance for judging whether someone has committed a war crime or a violation of IDF code of conduct.
So in other words, Israel investigates itself. How is that any different from a police department having an internal investigation of a police officer misbehaving? They think we're stupid, you guys.
That's one of the reasons why we have concerns about the ICC. The ICC is set up to be a court of last resort. If a country isn't properly holding itself and its personnel accountable, that's when the ICC comes in, not in the middle of the process as they have done here. That said, ultimately.
So again, he just told on himself here, right? So he said the ICC gets involved, right? After a country has already taken the steps to investigate themselves. So Israel apparently has said, we're looking into this matter, we're looking into that matter since October 7th. When they fail to do so, that is when the ICC comes in, which the ICC is doing right now. So Matt Miller is telling on himself. The fact that the ICC is pursuing these arrest warrants, that tells you that Israel has not held itself accountable, which why would it? That's like a police department holding its own officers accountable. Why would it? So he's really messing up here, and I don't think he's realizing what he's revealing to people.
Ultimately, and you know this, Matt, and because we've spoken about it a lot, we believe that there should be the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. And an independent Palestinian state would have the ability to join the Rome Statute and become a member of the International Criminal Court, as every state in the world has the right to do. But
until then, they're SOL?
that is
I
not
mean,
what, no, that, no.
So where do they go in the meantime?
They are not SOL. I said, first of all, Israel has its own investigations. Second, we have accountability mechanisms here. We have processes that are ongoing to look at Israel's compliance with international humanitarian law.
So he's struggling here, guys. He's struggling here. He's admitting to you, though, that Israel investigates itself. They are not going to tell on themselves.
There are places to look at these questions. It's just, in our view, fundamentally not a role of the ICC. And I should say, but remember, we have a jurisdictional complaint here, and that we don't believe the ICC has jurisdiction. But if you looked at the statement the secretary made that I echoed in my opening remarks, that isn't our only problem with the action the prosecutor has taken. We also have a problem that he has short-circuited an investigation and brought this action without waiting to see where these Israeli investigations end up, without completing the trip that he had planned to come to Israel to look into these questions. So it's not just a question of jurisdiction, it's also a question of the way the investigation has been conducted.
So is that chief prosecutor, is he supposed to wait till all of the people that are left in Gaza starve to death before he actually moves forward with some type of arrest warrant? Is that what he's supposed to do? Is he supposed to wait until all the Palestinian people that are left in Gaza are dead before he actually says, okay, now it's time to pursue an arrest warrant against Netanyahu? Do you see the problem here is Matt Miller is a tool of the State Department to continue to provide cover for the state of Israel. That is Matt Miller's job. That is what he is doing. I don't even think Matt Miller believes what he's saying himself. This guy has already been prepped with responses. He already has been told how to respond to these questions and what to say, but he is a puppet. The people that are in front, the people that are giving the responses, the people that are in the press conferences, these are not the people that are really making the decisions. These are just the people that are delivering the news. The people who are making the decisions are the people that we never get to see. So people will say, well, what about the president of the United States and not calling for a ceasefire? Right. Who is telling him to make that decision? Who's behind the president, ladies and gentlemen? Who are the donors? The people that you never get to see. That's what we have to look for.
So let's just focus on jurisdiction for a second. Who does have jurisdiction here?
So the government of Israel has jurisdiction
over the occupied territory.
We have jurisdiction
over Gaza, which is not entirely
They
occupied.
have jurisdiction into looking at the actions by their military personnel.
Palestinians, if they have a complaint, they have to bring it to Israeli courts.
We have jurisdiction, and we
you have
with the use of our equipment.
I'm sorry. How do you have
with the use of our military equipment that we have provided?
How do you have jurisdiction?
If you look at the Leahy law, if you look at
that's not jurisdiction in a criminal process. That's
not in a criminal process, but it has to do with the determinations that we make and the policies that flow from it. So, but Matt, long term, you were right that we want to see.
You used to work for DOJ, Matt.
You were
wrong. There's no U.S. does not have jurisdiction.
There are different. I wasn't referring to criminal jurisdiction, Matt. There are different ways to look at this. Long term, we agree with you that the Palestinian people should be a state that has and have the ability to make these determinations. But that's not where we are today. That's where we're trying to get to.
Just because there isn't a Palestinian state, that doesn't give Israel the right to starve the people in Gaza. Right. So Matt is getting pretty tense. He's kind of upset here because people keep doing what they're doing. But I want to show you something else, too, in reference to the State Department, how they continue to expose themselves and how they can be very hypocritical. Shout out to Asel Rod for this. Remember when you used the ICC's war crime charges against Putin to call him an international pariah, right? So listen to this. Just a reminder from Mr. Matt Miller.
I think Putin's actions have cemented him as an international pariah. Remember, he's been charged by the ICC with war crimes, was not able to travel to the most recent meeting of the BRICS because of that decision to charge him, did not show up at the G20 meeting, no doubt because he didn't want to hear from a number of the countries there about the results and the consequences of his actions. So yes, I would absolutely make that assessment.
So you heard that, right? So when it's in reference to Vladimir Putin, it is okay. It's okay to call out or agree with the ICC statement, but not when it comes to Benjamin Netanyahu, right? Now, that is in response to this statement that he made here, where he said that there was no equivalence between Hamas and Israel. Listen to this.
As the secretary said in a statement a short time ago, the United States fundamentally rejects the announcement today from the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court that he is applying for arrest warrants for senior Israeli officials together with warrants for Hamas terrorists. There should be no equivalence between Israel and Hamas.
So, do you see this? Right? So, let's say we agree with Matt Miller that there should be no equivalence. Well, I would describe them like this. Yes, one is an occupier and an oppressor, Israel, and the other are basically resistance fighters. One is an occupier, the other one is occupied. Where am I wrong? So you see, the real problem that Matt Miller has, I told you he would expose himself, is the fact that the prosecutor is issuing arrest, we're trying to issue arrest warrants for Israel and Hamas. And Matt Miller has a problem with that, whether there's jurisdiction or not. That's just an excuse. Matt Miller has a problem with that because it basically says to the world that they are the same when it comes to war crimes. And he does not want that to be revealed to the world. That's the problem that Matt Miller has.
None. Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization that carried out the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust and is still holding dozens of innocent people hostage, including Americans. Furthermore, the United States has been clear since well before the current conflict that the ICC has no jurisdiction over this matter. The ICC was established by its state parties as a court of limited jurisdiction. These limits are rooted in principles of complementarity, which do not appear to have been applied here, amid the prosecutor's rush to seek these arrest warrants rather than allowing the Israeli legal system a full and timely opportunity to proceed.
In other words, rather than allowing the Israeli legal system to delay as long as they want to, and in the meantime, the IDF will continue to steal the aid and the food that's going into Gaza, and the Palestinian people will starve. They have been investigating, having these internal investigations since October. It's now May. This is the dumbest statement that I've ever heard. Dumbest thing I've ever heard.
In other situations, the prosecutor deferred to national investigations and worked with states to allow them time to investigate. The prosecutor did not afford the same opportunity to Israel in this case, which has ongoing investigations into allegations against its personnel. There are also deeply troubling process questions. Despite not being a member of the court, Israel was prepared to cooperate with the prosecutor and had made that clear. In fact, the prosecutor himself was scheduled to visit Israel as early as next week to discuss the investigation and hear from the Israeli government. The prosecutor's staff was supposed to land in Israel today to coordinate the visit, and instead, Israel was informed that the prosecutor's staff didn't get on their flight around the same time that the prosecutor himself went on television to announce these charges.
Again, that is Israel's side of the story. So you see how, once again, whatever the Israeli government says, our State Department will just take them at their word and won't question it. But when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to people in the West Bank, when it comes to anyone that they do not consider to be an ally of the West, they're not willing to take their word. But Israel can say whatever they want to, and they just say we should believe it because Israel has said it. Now, check this out. Because you see, this is going to shock you. Not everyone agrees with the U.S. position in reference to the ICC trying to issue an arrest warrant for Netanyahu. In fact, one of the U.S. owned Western allies has spoken out against the U.S. position. Believe it or not, France actually supports the ICC decision. What is Macron doing? Macron is just doing his own thing. Remember, I told you about him last year where he said, why should Europe still follow the United States? Maybe Europe should try to become its own, power. Maybe we should be a third power and not just follow the lead of the US. He made that statement last year, and here we are. France backs the ICC after it seeks arrest warrants for Israel's Netanyahu Hamas leaders. Let's get into this, fam. I did not expect to see this on my bingo card today. Did not expect it at all. Nope. France backs the ICC and the fight against impunity, its foreign ministry said after the ICC prosecutor requested arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Hamas leaders for alleged war crimes. On Monday, ICC prosecutor Karim Khan said he had requested arrest warrants for Netanyahu, his defense chief Yoav Gallant, and 3 Hamas leaders, including its chief Yahya Sinwar. Okay, now let's go on to France. France supports the ICC, its independence, and the fight against impunity in all situations. While U.S. President Joe Biden called the legal step against Israeli officials outrageous, the French foreign ministry took a different stance. So is Netanyahu now going to call Macron anti-Semitic as well? Are we seeing a little bit of a ripple among the West? Is this France's way of saying, you know what? We're getting pretty tired of being in the background of your stuff, man. We're getting pretty tired of just going along with the U.S. just because. Or could it be that maybe Macron, and being the way that he is, will just try to flip-flop at some point and change his mind? He's done that before. Or maybe France has just had enough. It goes on to say here, as far as Israel is concerned, it will be up to the court's pretrial chamber to decide whether to issue these warrants after examining the evidence put forward by the prosecutor. The ministry said that. It goes on to say Foreign Minister Stephanie told the National Assembly on Tuesday that the simultaneous warrant request must not establish an equivalency between Hamas and Israel. So again, they don't want any type of equivalency established there. They just, I guess, just want you to move forward with the arrest of the individuals and the individual crimes. Remember, the ICC arrests individuals. She goes on, or they go on to say, on one side, you have a terrorist group that congratulated itself on October 7 attacks. And on the other side, you have democracy, Israel, that must respect international law while conducting a war it did not start. Let's highlight democracy and let's talk about what's really happening here with this word. Why do you think Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, everyone that's telling you that we must reelect Joe Biden, why do you think they continue to say we must protect our democracy? That's not just in reference to domestic policy. That's also them speaking about foreign policy. They also think when they say protect our democracy, they're not just talking about the United States, they're talking about Israel too. Remember, they consider Israel to be like an extension of the United States. They literally announced today, hold on, folks, literally announced today, there is legislation being put forth in Congress to give IDF soldiers the same benefits as U.S. troops. I kid you not. Now they're willing to move mountains for Israel. They're willing to do anything for Israel. Now they want to give them the same benefits that they give U.S. soldiers, which is excellent health care, by the way, etc. But they don't want to give everybody in this country health care. They don't want to give you a federal increase of the minimum wage, but they want to give the IDF soldiers the same benefits as U.S. troops in this country. I cannot make this up. So kudos to France for being one of the few to step forward and say, nah, actually, we're totally fine with this. It makes me wonder if other Western allies will also come forward and back France. Interesting time, folks. Interesting times. We'll have to wait and see what happens and what the court says in reference to possibly arresting Benjamin Netanyahu. But at the end of the day, it is not looking good for Bibi. Not looking good. Even if they don't arrest him, your reputation is done, son.